Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Phyllis Schlafly Collegians. This is the 32nd Collegians, and we're on to our final guest now. Thank you so much for joining us for this program. And let's get into Josiah Lippincott, who is known as the Biden regime's most feared Twitter poster. He was banned 6 times, if I have that correct, before Elon came and freed him. Josiah served in the Marine Corps for 4 years and is now a PhD candidate at the Hillsdale College Van Andel Graduate School of Statesmanship. He writes for American Greatness as well as his own Substack, Regime Critic. We love Hillsdale. It's a great school.
Great institution.
So true. So we wanted to start off with the Israel-Iran conflict. I mean, you've posted a lot about this, both on your Twitter and I think your Substack as well. And you actually served, so you bring a different perspective from a lot of people. There's a lot of people posting like, "I'm not going to fight this war," except like you are served. You have skin in the game or know what it's like. Now, what happened there, and how well do you think Trump handled that situation?
Well, all things considered, the fact that we don't have boots on the ground in Iran right now, and the fact that the conflict basically has petered out thus far, is a very good sign. It means that the handling, all things considered, has been good. As for the long-term effects of these interventions, or whether we should be doing them at all, I think that's a separate question. And I have stated consistently that I think American involvement in the Middle East has been, over my lifetime and before, simply ruinous for the United States. And so any kind of engagement with that region with military force, I think, is a mistake, because these people, I call them the desert drama queens. There's just problem after problem, and it doesn't get resolved. And Donald Trump dropping the F-bomb, describing working with the Israelis and Iranians, encapsulates something I have felt for a very long time about that whole region.
I was going to say that was I think a really interesting moment, because we've been talking all night about how the Trump era, not many presidents get an era. We talk about the Jackson era. There's always, the Trump era really is pretty unique, and it's not just that he's a showman. He knows media, he knows camera, he knows when to come out and bring down the sledgehammer of anger or something like that. But it really encapsulates what a lot of people feel, this frustration that comes boiling over. But the interesting thing is, he seems willing to do something about it. Like it's this odd mix of, fine, I'm gonna drop a bomb, I'm gonna show military deterrence and might, but then we're also gonna show restraint. This is something I haven't seen in a president in my lifetime, and it's so unique. I mean, people respond to it in such an incredible way.
Yeah, I would say that the complexity of the geopolitical situation today is the primary reason that I push for a policy of defense, is that the moralizing crusading that has dominated American foreign policy over the last century or more, I think, has really burned itself out. And it has done immense damage to our industrial might and our military might as well. There's been a real loss of political capital because of our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and because of the failures of the political establishment to produce the kind of peace and prosperity that has been promised over and over again to the American people. And so often they've gotten some of it, but there's been a rug pull in the end. So, I think staying out of foreign conflicts is one of the hallmarks of Trump's, his gift and his political platform. And so I very much hope for and push for that we continue to remain out of these regions in a military capacity. I just think there's so many things going on. There's Russia, Ukraine, there's Israel, Iran, there's stuff going on near China. So often these things are interrelated, and we need to think long and hard about what our real interests are and then push for those.
Yeah, that's actually something else we wanted to ask about, because Trump, after he won the election and was going into office, he was talking about peace with Israel and Hamas, and then peace with Russia and Ukraine. And even though one of those conflicts has kind of simmered down some, Russia and Ukraine, like even today, there's more going on. Like Trump is sending them more defensive weapons, and this seems like it's kind of the opposite of what we were hoping for. So can you clarify like what's going on here, and like is Trump just unable, given the situation, to bring the conflict down?
Well, I mean, they're the two primary actors in the conflict, Russia and Ukraine, don't want peace. And so there isn't peace, right? Putin thinks it's in his best interest to grind the Ukrainians into the dust. He thinks that's what will best preserve the Russian near abroad, preserve their national interests. And the Ukrainians, by contrast, want to side with the West, and they believe that that continuing the conflict is in their best interest. So again, I think Russia-Ukraine is and I've said this before, it's a nihilistic conflict from my point of view. It's the sort of negative apotheosis or negative pinnacle of the liberal world order. It's slaughter in the name of liberalism and democracy, but without any remotely tangible benefit, to my view, for instance, for the Ukrainian people, or for us, for that matter, or even for Europe. I just don't think right now, with their military capacity, the Russians are anywhere close to being able to threaten Europe in any sort of existential way. And so to see the hysteria that surrounds this conflict is boggling to me. And I think it just indicates a sort of spiritual dissipation, that we're going through the motions of crusading for democracy, but the reality is nihilistic slaughter in Eastern Europe yet again for another time in the last 100 years. So, can Trump bring this to an end? Well, they want to keep fighting. I mean, what are the options available? To my mind, I think the best solution is to simply wash our hands of this conflict. It isn't going to be the end of the world, no matter what happens. And there's a lot of bad things that have already occurred because of this war. And the American government under Obama and Biden in particular just absolutely poured gasoline on the fire there. We were constantly intervening in Ukraine. And the whole history there is, and this is something Americans didn't vote on. Joe Biden at no point in the 2020 race ever ran on giving substantial military aid to the Ukrainian government. And yet somehow we ended up in a conflict there. And I think that issue of the consent of the governed, from my perspective, is deeply problematic. Republican government is part of our way of life. We need to preserve that. And that means you need to have these issues out in the open. We can't just find ourselves quasi-involved. I mean, we are essentially at war with a nuclear power in Russia by the fact that we provide open military aid and targeting and material resources to the Ukrainians to conduct military operations. That's not neutrality from a reasonable standpoint. And yet we want to claim the rights of neutrality at the same time. It's an extremely confused situation. And it just shows how desiccated and dissipated the energy of the world, of the liberal world order has become. It's a serious problem. And so I hope the conflict ends. I'm tired of seeing the slaughter, but the capacity for us to change things is limited by just the reality on the ground. We're not the only actors on the world stage.
Well, let me turn that same conversation, a little bit back toward our, we were just talking about the Iran-Israel conflict. Trump's relationship with Israel is very unique. Mm-hmm. And I know this is something that does have a lot of popular American support. And we don't have to make this a theological hour and get into, why that is. Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson had that conversation a few weeks ago. But that one's different because, I know that there were a lot of us worried, with Trump and the donation, running machine, the money it takes to run for politics. A lot of us worried, now hold on, is this one of the lobbies? Is the AIPAC, is the, Israel's state interest lobby going to have a tight hold on him and we're not going to see much of a change here? Or is he going to come in and say, hold on, new sheriff, like he's kind of doing with Russia and Ukraine? What's your sense of what the Trump administration has done so far? Because it seems to me that he is trying to play the fine line down the middle, but actually doing better than I had worried he might, but also not necessarily as far toward the side of, hold on, we're done just running along with this and supporting everything blindly. We need to have an America first policy when it comes to our allyship, our relationship with Israel. Do you think he's moving in the right direction? Do you have concerns? What do you see there in the future?
The thing I see most prominently is a generational divide. Young conservatives are tired of involvement in the Middle East, and you have an entire generation of veterans from the global war on terror who have come away extremely critical of the policymaking apparatus in D.C. And so even though I didn't serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, I am part of that movement. I belong to this wave of young veterans who was deeply critical of involvement there, deeply. And I think what I see even more this time around is inside the administration, there is there's no real faction foaming at the mouth for war in the Middle East. You see outsiders, individuals like Mark Levin, who are pushing for American involvement on behalf of Israel. And of course, you're going to have foreign lobbies like AIPAC that are going to push for American involvement. You also have other countries doing the same. The Gulf states are often quieter about it, but they certainly have a lot of pull in Washington, D.C. I think that's a problem. I'm an America First guy. I am a George Washington respecter. I believe in the wisdom of the founding fathers, that we need to avoid foreign entanglements. We need to prioritize our national interest. We need to not become the slaves of our passion to foreign countries. I think Trump, by pushing for a more non-interventionist foreign policy, is pointing the way toward the future, which is what I imagine as a much more muscular defensive posture. When we're sending weapons abroad, we're not keeping those weapons here for our own defense, and we may need them. We have invaders on our soil. I see people who are not here legally flying the flags of foreign powers in American cities. To me, that's a way bigger concern than what the desert drama queens are doing on the other side of the planet. Because, and this is something very controversial that I've said, and I'll maintain it again, lots of countries have nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. India has nuclear weapons. North Korea has nuclear weapons. Russia has nuclear weapons. And yet we haven't seen the use of those nuclear weapons since World War II. I honestly look at the Iranian regime and I don't see crazy religious fanatics. I see liberals. That, if you read the Ayatollah's speeches translated into English, he's talking about the evils of colonialism, and we need to improve GDP, and we need to rescue women and uplift them. And to me, he's not out of place at a typical liberal college campus. That doesn't mean we should be best friends with the Iranians. I think it just means we need to be more realistic about the real threats that we face abroad. And Trump is pointing the way toward a serious reconsideration of our role in the world, prioritizing our real interests, which is the defense of our rights and liberties, right? It's the defense of our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that has to be the number one priority. The interests of other countries are entirely secondary to that primary aim. And that's the focus that Trump and the MAGA movement have brought to foreign policy.
Yeah, and so I think that this is a good time to transition into the second topic that we wanted to discuss here, which has come up a lot over the course of the Collegians, just because it's such an important issue. Mass migration, and that really is an America First issue, because it's like the foreign powers are within our borders now, and we have to deal with that. And you, a couple months ago, I think, offered your services to boost up the deportation rates, and and we're seeing right now that Tom Homan says, okay, we need to get it up to 7,000, and that makes me happy, because I did the math a few weeks ago, and I was like, to get all the ones from Biden out, it's got to be around 7,000. So what has been holding the admin back because it's been like, at first it was less than 1,000 a day, and now it's like maybe like 1,500 a day, and they're trying to get to 3,000. What's holding them back? Why can't we get it up to what needs to be done?
Well, reality is out there, and it has a say, and there's complexity involved in any kind of major law enforcement or logistical undertaking. And you can see this, and I'm actually extremely hopeful. I'm white-pilled about this. I thought the big, beautiful bill was better than anything I could have expected. And there's a data point in that bill which I think is particularly relevant, which is, from what I've seen, $1.25 billion has been allocated to the Executive Office of Immigration Review at the Department of Justice. And they're the administrative law courts that go about processing the illegal immigrants and adjudicating whether or not they can be deported. And so that was the bottleneck for deportations. Under the Biden and previous regime, what would happen is people would get arrested, they'd be put out, these illegal immigrants would get arrested, they'd be put out on bond, then they'd just disappear, and it would take 10 years for their case to make its way through this administrative tribunal. And in the meantime, they would go and just disappear. And so by the time they actually get the letter saying, okay, it's time for you to be deported, they're not going to leave, right? There's no way to really track them down. And that wasn't a priority. But when an illegal immigrant is in custody and they know they'll be in custody until the administrative hearing on their asylum requests or on their deportability, 8 times out of 10, they'll just admit deportability and request to be sent home. And so to me, just looking at the big, beautiful bill, looking at the funding that went through, there's a level of seriousness and knowledge of administrative law, of administrative procedure that the Trump administration has this time around, which is deeply impressive. I think this is somewhere where Trump is absolutely going to fulfill the campaign promise to get illegal immigrants out of the country. And, again, there's a lot of complaints. Trump doesn't do enough. The numbers aren't good. And what I would say is the trend line is what matters. We just need to start moving in the right direction. The way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so, we need more agents out there. The administration is prioritizing the hiring of 10,000 new agents. They're looking at Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which will allow local law enforcement to be deputized and used by the Trump administration in order to arrest illegal immigrants. And again, the hard part isn't the logistics, it's the administrative law portion. And the Trump administration is keyed into that question. And you can see that in terms of their funding and legislative priorities. So from my perspective, Trump absolutely just hitting it out of the park on the immigration issue. And I think we are in such a better place now than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, I've never been more optimistic about the fact that we can restore American sovereignty. And I'm grateful for Trump for that opportunity.
Well, let me ask a little bit of a follow-up, because you just touched on something there. We hear at Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, we hear tons from the grassroots, from people. And one of the things that is most concerning, I don't hear people give a good report for, well, let me say it this way. When we encounter friends, family members, fellow churchgoers, coworkers who are just getting a steady diet of the fear-mongering and of fake news, and they're really not looking for information like a lot of us are. One of the big things when it comes to immigration, due process. Due process. You have to give these people due process. It sounds like a minute ago, you just referenced the immigration courts and a boost that's being given there. What's a good short answer for conservatives to be able to give to the folks who haven't really red-pilled yet, haven't looked at this and kind of gone eyes wide open on the information? What's the good answer to, yes, there is due process, and here it is? How do we tell people that in a quick way?
Yeah, so it's a complicated question because the due process for citizens and then for foreigners who aren't supposed to be there looks different in each of those cases. One of the things, for instance, with citizens, there's a very high bar for what due process means. You have constitutional protections under, that these are a part of our natural rights that the government protects. With foreigners, it's a little different. They don't have the same constitutional protections. Foreigners in the United States are guests here. We can remove them if we feel like it. They don't have the same rights of citizenship. They don't have the same right to say, well, I have a right to free speech here. We can remove you if we don't like what you're saying. If you're advocating for communism or for crazy transgender policies or something like that as a foreigner, we absolutely have the right under the Constitution and under the law of nations to remove you back to your home country. With illegal aliens, we go even a further step, which is to say, you're really an invader. You have violated our sovereignty and our border, and there's a case to be made that you're an enemy combatant. Now, the reality is most of these people are here for economic reasons. They're not intentionally trying to kill Americans. They're trying to make money. But the reality is the due process is ascertaining, are you an illegal immigrant? So if I come up to someone, they don't speak English, they don't have documents, they don't have a visa, they can't produce it when given the opportunity, you are receiving due process. We're asking you the questions to determine what sort of rights do you have under the Constitution? And then removal from the country in that case, after that determination is made, is entirely consistent with the law of nations. In fact, I right now think that even the adjudicative process that was set up by Congress, the Executive Office of Immigration Review, immigration courts, they're not really courts in the Article 3 sense. They're administrative tribunals that are created by Congress as part of the executive branch. To my mind, Congress has overstepped its bounds in creating some of these procedures that really, the important thing is the executive branch making that determination. It's part of what it means to enforce the law. But that aside, illegal immigrants do receive due process as long as we're ensuring that they are in fact illegal immigrants. And there are easy, simple ways to do that. And that is what is being done now. Illegal immigrants in this country receive more than enough due process, more than enough. And so a lot of the fears about this, I think, are very much overblown. And, there's a need for a reality check.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to talk a little bit about, speaking of reality checks. We see a lot of stories, and we kind of saw that the media was going to try to do this in the lead up to Trump's second administration that I think disingenuously highlight very, like sob stories of, oh, this person, like, even though they're illegal, look, they have a good life for good things. And, totally leaves by the wayside any other factors, such as, just properly enforcing the law of the land. And then but on the flip side, I was seeing on Twitter the last few days, the map of traffic in Los Angeles. Yeah. And people are like shocked because there's no traffic. And it's like, oh, wow, this is one of the second order effects of immigration. So I was wondering if, to kind of remedy the very disingenuous kind of psyoping of the American people through these sob stories, what are some of the actual like consequences of mass migration, both legal and illegal, that impact the everyday lives of normal Americans?
Yeah, I mean, the first part on these sob stories is a lot of them are completely overblown. It's like a Mexican got on a plane to go to Mexico. That happens every single day. A lot of these immigrants, illegal immigrants, visit their home countries. We have refugees who go back to the countries they're allegedly fleeing from to go to vacation and see their relatives. To me, there's nothing illegitimate or bad about Mexicans living in Mexico. I visited Mexico. It's not my country. It's not where I want to live. It's not a curse to be there. I mean, it can be made better by the people who live there. And honestly, if the conditions are bad, it raises the question, why haven't the people who live there made them better? So to my mind, deportation it's not even a punishment. It's an administrative proceeding where you are being returned to the country where you belong. You're a citizen there. That's what sob story? Like, well, we were working in America illegally and I made a bunch of money, more than I could have made back home. Now I have to go back home. Okay. I mean, I'm struggling to see the sob story here. Like, well, my kid really likes it here. Well, I really like having a country that has sovereign borders, and you didn't consider that when you came here. So to my mind, these sob stories betray really a lack of, I mean, do people not have a spine or like any kind of sense of just life? Like, yeah, sometimes things happen that you don't want to have happen. Well, you made a risk by coming here illegally. You're lucky that the conditions are not such that something worse than deportation happens. I mean, and that could happen. I don't want that to happen. So, I mean, more broadly in terms of second order effects, one of the big issues at the heart of immigration enforcement is economic factors. Businesses like having the ability to bring in foreign laborers because they argue it benefits the American economy by increasing the amount of productivity. This causes us to be able to produce cheaper goods. This is better for Americans overall. What business leaders leave out of this calculus and what politicians leave out are the negative second order effects that affect our political life, that affect the use of common goods. There's a real cost to be paid in living in a country where you don't speak the language of where there's a huge number of foreigners in the country who don't speak your language. They don't share your religious views. They don't really understand them. They think you're a racist. They vote for hardcore left-wing parties. They use up social services like emergency rooms and schools and courts of law and police protection and the military service. They benefit from all of these things, and they're not paying in the same way that those of us who are citizens pay in. Or even when they pay in at the same level, it's like, wait a second, you're not supposed to even be here. So why are we being treated equally? Why, if I can receive all the rights of citizenship by being an illegal, what's the value of citizenship? And in my mind, there's no more important distinction at the heart of our political life than that between citizens and foreigners, between those who are protected by our common, you can use the language of the social compact. We are united. We have an alliance. We will defend one another in combat. We will protect each other from crime. And we are members, and it's consensual. We chose this. And then you have people who we did not consent to be here who want to benefit from our alliance. And my policy on that is to say, if you're going to benefit, it's going to be at a cost. Like these companies, at the very, very least, and this is something Trump has talked about, if we're going to have foreigners here at all working, they should be taxed at a higher rate than citizens. They should not have a pathway to citizenship. They should not have access to birthright citizenship for their children. None of those things. If you want to have economic migration, then there's an argument for having it. But then don't give these people political rights. Don't give them the same access and protection that we have here. And, and that's coming up. And Trump has mentioned this with Brooke Rollins and others, this push for, well, can we relax immigration enforcement? And from my standpoint, there's zero argument for doing so unless we get the question of citizenship and the distinction between political life and economic life made very, very clear. And I'm not sure we're there yet.
And something I want to bring up real quick, because I think this kind of just like dives into the heart of the issue, is like, if I were to play devil's advocate, I would hear what you just said and say like, well, you didn't choose to be born in this country and they didn't choose to be born in that country. But like and I see a lot of people take that stance, but that doesn't consider like the choices that the people that came before me made. Like I am here because of the choices of my grandparents and their decisions, whereas like you come from a bad country because your grandparents made bad decisions. Like what's...
Sure. I mean, a lot of this is simply silly. It's about deliberating about things upon which there is no deliberation, right? It's just a given. It's a given. I didn't choose to be born, and yet I was, and now we're here. And so we have to make the best of what we can actually deliberate about and make choices about. And the question of our common good and the preservation of our way of life is something we can make choices about. And by the way, these immigrants who come here searching for a better life, the question is, why couldn't you do that in your home country? Why can't we have good relations across borders? I mean, it's one thing to visit a country as a tourist or to appreciate something from abroad. Why is it that you need to be here and be a citizen? And then why do you attack the country that you came to as racist or sexist or xenophobic? Wait a second. Like, none of that makes sense. So a lot of these liberal arguments to me are just completely spurious. They're not dealing with reality. It's dealing with, what if I were a goldfish instead? Yeah, what if? What if the space monkeys come down and take you to, Mars? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's that tier of reasoning. This isn't serious. The people who make these arguments, this is the kind of thing, the freshman bull session in the dorm. It'd be dumb then too.
Well, okay, I wrote down 3 things, and I don't think we're going to have time for all 3 of them, so let me prioritize these for a second. First of all, hot take. Birthright citizenship. We saw that one. Yeah. Nationwide injunctions shut down. Great Supreme Court. But it looks like the birthright citizenship issue itself is actually being punted a little bit. Do you think we're going to see some sort of ruling on that from the Supreme Court? Or do you think that at this point we're just on the status quo where we are, continuing to hammer that out in the executive and legislative branches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am a heretic when it comes to the Supreme Court's power. Oh, what does the Supreme Court care or think? And I'm like, they are one of the 3 branches, and as Alexander Hamilton points out in Federalist 78, they're the weakest of the 3 branches. And I'm just really tired of hearing them be made out to be super important in our system. Nobody elects them, so they really should not be making big political decisions either for or against the right wing. We need to win elections, and we need to get legislation through Congress that emphasizes our priorities. As a matter of law, birthright citizenship does not exist. And the Supreme Court, for it to rule honestly, would rule the 14th Amendment does not grant illegal immigrants or foreigners more broadly, just based on the common sense understanding of the phrase, subject to the jurisdiction of the laws. Foreigners are not in the same way that citizens are. So they don't have the same right to citizenship. And so birthright citizenship doesn't exist. But if the Supreme Court were to rule, actually, they all do ketamine together and discover in the emanations and penumbras of the Constitution that it's there, I would ignore that because it's illogical and it's unconstitutional. And there is nothing that binds the president or Congress to an unconstitutional ruling by the Supreme Court. So from my perspective, I think we're in a good position. People are talking about it. It's better than it was 10 years ago. I think we are very close today, much closer than we were, to repealing the Hart-Celler Immigration Act of 1965. And that would be a boon to the United States. We have got to reformulate the law on immigration. We need to radically rethink legal migration to the United States. That's part of all of this. And I would think right now, I put out a poll recently on X, just saying, would you support an immigration moratorium? And I think just huge, overwhelming supermajority for a 10-year moratorium. And honestly, I'd be okay with a 90% reduction overall in legal migration. That's not even a moratorium. That's just a reduction. But we need to focus on ourselves. We need to reestablish national identity.
Well, and my second question,
Sure.
I know your answer at this point, but I'm going to have you give it. So one of the other questions that's gotten very hot topic, of course, this is coming out of New York City because of the prospective Democrat mayoral candidate there, hopeful mayor Zoran Mamdani. Denaturalization. That I did not ever expect to see as a trending topic, and suddenly it is.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, this is the time to rip the Band-Aid off. What's your take on this? Because, you know, in my mind, I see a growing, and I agree with it, a growing sentiment that, hold on, even though we have long, especially as conservatives, citizenship is the gold standard, citizen versus non-citizen, there's a question to be asked and a good answer to be given.
Yeah.
Does a citizen actually equal an American? Or is there a distinction between those two different things? Because we have unassimilated, naturalized citizens. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen with this? What's your take on it? Is that a Band-Aid to rip off? I think I know, but please take it away.
Well, I'll give a nuanced take, I suppose. The first and most shocking thing is that we're having the conversation at all. And I look at liberals more broadly, and how stupid did they have to be to get to this point? We could have gone on a very long time with 1990s liberalism. The liberals could have kept the welfare state. They could have kept a lot of the tax and regulatory policies they put in place. They could have kept that going for a very, very long time. And they squandered it by just going crazy. And so Zoran Mamdani, to me, represents the clearest articulation of the very real danger, the political effects of American foreign policy and of our immigration policy. We invade the world and then we invite the world. And we have a gay race communist, a communist who's in favor of racial politics and gay liberation and all of these other far left ideas, who could very quickly or soon be mayor of America's largest and most important city from the standpoint of finance and economics and all kinds of things and trade. This is an intolerable situation. I would argue Mamdani's naturalization was fundamentally illegitimate. He is a communist. He is a Marxist. He references Marxist dogma in articulating his policies. He should be prohibited from citizenship. There is law that could be used to denaturalize him in that specific case. More broadly, what we're seeing by the fact that you have people coming here and not assimilating and waving around a piece of paper that says, I have just as many rights as you, and then attacking the very country that they've entered, this is terrible. This is a bad idea. It needs to be reversed. We have got to take measures now, today, to prevent this from getting any worse, because there's a very real possibility of systematic political conflict that flows from an inability to solve these problems. I fear that. I want to avoid it. I'm a moderate. I'm a centrist. I'm here to avoid conflict and civil war or all the other negative things that can flow from a loss of a sense of national identity. And now is the time for action, and Trump is the man. He's the man of the hour.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to edit this question for you, because we've been asking each of our guests. Of course, Mason opened the segment. Our theme this year at this 32nd annual Collegians event has been the building America's golden age. We have this unique opportunity for at least a year and a half, we know, before the congressional makeup changes, possibly. And then for certainly 3.5 years with Trump in the White House, we have this unique moment. What to you is the number one priority you want to see accomplished? And based on our conversation, we may already know number one. So I'll give you the number 2 and 3. Give me your top 3. What are your priorities, number 1 and 2, that you want to see accomplished in this moment? Not just to fight back what was done to us, but to really build America's golden age, to renew the Constitution, to renew what it means to be an American, our identity.
I think the best opportunity we have right now is to restore peace and prosperity to the American people. And the great thing is it's a lot of what we don't do. There are so many things the liberal ruling class wanted to mess with and monkey with. And the reality is, if you just stop, life will get better for Americans all over the place. A lot of this panic about global warming and peak oil and all these quote unquote crises, they're not crises. They're not things that we need to worry about. We can have Americans just giving them choices again, giving them opportunities by simply taking the government's boot off their neck. That's a huge step forward toward prosperity. And when we look at restoring national sovereignty, that's the first thing we need to do. But after that comes allowing Americans to exercise their liberties. We took this country from a wilderness, effectively most of it a wilderness in 1776, to a superpower within 100 years. And that was because you had a high quality population devoted to the principles of liberty. You had a government that had limited but very important aims that it needed to accomplish. And putting those two things together resulted in unparalleled material and spiritual prosperity for the American people. We can have that back. You can just do things. It's really true. So much of what people think isn't possible is because of things that human beings did that can be undone. And that opportunity is available to us now. And peace and prosperity are available to us right now. And Trump's key issues of immigration, trade, and war, staying out of foreign conflicts, increasing American trade and prosperity, and then reducing the flow of foreigners into our country, interfering with our politics. Do those three things, and we're on the pathway to an American golden age. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, quickly before we close out this segment, we're doing the 30-second Phyllis Schlafly Collegians because we're upholding the legacy of Phyllis Schlafly. And if there's one issue that Phyllis was way ahead of the curve on, was mass migration. And she had this fantastic book in the 2000s, How Mass Legal Immigration Dooms a Conservative Republican Party. Great book, and you can read it for free online now if you go to archives.phyllisschlafly.com. It is on there completely for free in the book section, so you're welcome to go check it out, and all of the data is still just as true today as it was then when she was writing. Thank you so much for joining us, Josiah. This was an illuminating conversation. You can find Josiah on Twitter or X at @JLippincott_, and you can also find his Substack Regime Critic at lippincott.substack.com. Thank you, Josiah, for joining us.
Mason and Ryan, thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Folks, it has been a long night, a good long night, this 32nd annual Phyllis Schlafly Collegians. As we close out here, I just want to give a final charge. Please do go to phyllisschlafly.com. Sign up there, stay in touch with us, because whether it's building the next generation, reshaping the generations that are currently involved, it doesn't matter, top to bottom, the grassroots action, the restoration of our Constitution, the renewal of America is only going to happen the more that we add to our ranks of people who are not just informed a little bit politically, but understand who we are as a people, where we have come from. So in the mindset of Phyllis Schlafly, we've heard so much tonight about the political revolution that we are deep into right now. We've talked about the cultural revolution that we're right on the edge of that is really going farther. And I'd be remiss, and I know that Phyllis would want me to say so, it only matters if we come with a spiritual revolution as well, a spiritual renewal and an awakening. If the church returns to its churchiness, to its understanding of who we are as a people, the values and the beliefs that built this nation. So go and get involved. I want you to do something. Go back through this video. If you didn't write down, everyone on the screen has had their X account, has had their Substack or their website, the podcast, whatever it is. There are a lot of incredible thinkers and movers and shakers that are happening. We've just had a small sampling of it tonight. I hope it has been worth your while. I hope it's been illuminating and enjoyable, and I hope that you continue this conversation with us at phyllisschlafly.com. Thank you for being a part of our 32nd annual Phyllis Schlafly Collegians program. There's going to be a lot more coming in 2025. I hope that you stay tuned here. And until then, God bless you. We appreciate you so much, and have a wonderful night.